3 months, living across the hall, and Marcus Reed had never once looked at her. He crossed the street when Elena Morales appeared, took the stairs when she waited for the elevator, acted like she was something to escape from. So that Tuesday night, she stopped him in the hallway. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" Marcus froze. His jaw tightened. After a long silence, he whispered, "Because looking at you hurts." And before she could ask why, he turned away, leaving her alone with a pain she didn't understand. Yet, Elena had noticed it from day one. The moving truck pulled up to Maple Heights Apartments on a Saturday morning in late September. She'd been carrying groceries up the stairs when she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, helping a young boy arrange boxes in the hallway. The man had glanced up, caught her eye for half a second, then immediately looked away. She thought nothing of it then. But the pattern continued. Every morning at 7:15, she left for her shift at the clinic. Marcus would be locking his door across the hall. The moment he heard her keys, he'd rush toward the stairwell, never the elevator, always the stairs, descending 2 steps at a time like the building was on fire. At the mailboxes, he timed his visits for when she wasn't there. In the parking lot, he'd see her walking toward her car and suddenly remember something he'd left upstairs. Once, she held the elevator door for him. He muttered, "I'll catch the next one," and turned back toward the lobby. Elena wasn't the type to take things personally. She'd spent her whole life being friendly, approachable. People usually warmed to her, but Marcus Reed treated her like a ghost he couldn't afford to see. She asked the building manager, Mrs. Chen, about him. "Marcus? Oh, he's lovely. Single father. Works as a paramedic. His son Noah's a sweetheart. Very quiet man. Keeps to himself." Quiet was one thing. Deliberate avoidance was another. Elena tried not to care. She had her own reasons for being in Maple Heights, reasons that had nothing to do with unfriendly neighbors. But the more Marcus avoided her, the more she noticed. The way his shoulders tensed when he heard her voice in the hallway. The way he gripped his keys tighter when they accidentally made eye contact. The way he looked, almost afraid. That Tuesday evening, she'd had enough. She heard his door open, heard his footsteps heading toward the stairs. She stepped out of her apartment and called his name. "Marcus." He stopped. Didn't turn around. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" The hallway felt too small suddenly. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere below, a door slammed. Marcus's hand rested on the stairwell door. His back was still to her. For a moment, she thought he'd just leave without answering. Then he spoke, voice low and rough. "Because looking at you hurts." Elena's breath caught. He turned his head slightly, not quite facing her, but enough that she could see his profile. The hard line of his jaw. The exhaustion in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he added quietly. "I know that doesn't make sense. I know I've been rude. But that's the truth. What do you mean it hurts?" Marcus shook his head. "I can't explain. Not right now. I can't." His voice cracked on the last word. Then he pushed through the stairwell door and was gone. Elena stood alone in the hallway, her heart pounding, her mind racing with questions she didn't have answers for. What had she done to him? Why would looking at her cause pain? And why did his words sound less like an excuse and more like a confession? Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Marcus's words over and over. "Because looking at you hurts." It wasn't anger in his voice, it wasn't disgust, it was something deeper, something raw and old. She'd heard that kind of pain before. 2 years ago, she'd moved to Portland after finishing her nursing degree. She told people it was for the job opportunities, the change of scenery. That was only half true. The real reason was simpler and infinitely more complicated. She was looking for Marcus Reed, not because she wanted to confront him, not because she blamed him, but because she needed to know, needed to understand what had happened in those final moments, needed to hear from the one person who'd been there when her sister died. Lucia Morales had been 29 years old when the accident happened. It was a rainy November night. the kind where the roads turn to glass and visibility drops to nothing. Lucia had been driving home from a double shift at the restaurant. She never made it. The police report said she lost control on a curve. The car hit the guardrail, flipped twice, and came to rest upside down in a drainage ditch. Emergency services arrived within 8 minutes. The first responder on scene was a paramedic named Marcus Reed. Elena had learned his name from the incident report. She'd tried calling the fire station, but they wouldn't give out personal information. She'd searched for him online, found nothing. Then, 6 months ago, a mutual acquaintance mentioned seeing a paramedic named Marcus at a community event in Maple Heights. It took Elena 3 weeks to find an apartment in the same building. She didn't plan what would happen next. She thought maybe they'd run into each other naturally. She'd introduce herself, mention Lucia, ask if he remembered, ask if he'd be willing to talk. She never expected him to run. Now, lying in the dark, Elena wondered if she'd made a mistake. Maybe some people didn't want to remember. Maybe Marcus had seen too much death in his career, and Lucia was just another case file he'd rather forget. But his reaction didn't match that theory. His avoidance felt personal. His pain felt specific. The next morning, Elena sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and made a decision. She wasn't going to chase him down. She wasn't going to force a conversation. But she wasn't going to pretend anymore either. She pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. Marcus, my name is Elena Morales. I know you've been avoiding me, and after last night, I think I understand why, or at least, I understand that there's a reason. I came to Maple Heights looking for you, not to cause you pain, not to dredge up difficult memories, but because 2 years ago, you were the first person to reach my sister after her accident. Her name was Lucia. She died that night, and I've spent every day since trying to understand what happened. The police report told me the facts, but it didn't tell me about her final moments. It didn't tell me if she was scared, if she said anything, if someone was there with her. I'm not asking you to relive trauma. I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. But if you ever feel ready to talk, I'm across the hall. I don't blame you for what happened. I just need to know she wasn't alone. Elena, she folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, along with a photograph. Lucia and Elena at their college graduation, arms around each other, smiling, and slid it under Marcus's door before she left for work. Marcus found the envelope when he got home from his shift. He stood in his doorway, staring down at it for a long time before picking it up. His hands shook as he opened it. The photograph fell out first. 2 women. Sisters, clearly. The resemblance was unmistakable. One of them was Elena. The other, Marcus's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor, his back against the door, the photo trembling in his hands. Lucia Morales. He'd tried so hard to forget her name. Had deliberately avoided looking at the incident report afterward. But names didn't matter when you were kneeling in the rain, reaching through a shattered window, holding someone's hand while they died. That night came back in fragments. The call had come in at 11:47. Single vehicle accident, Highway 26, vehicle overturned. Marcus and his partner Jake had arrived first, ahead of the fire crew. The rain was so heavy their boots slipped in the mud as they scrambled down the embankment. The car was on its roof. The driver's side crumpled inward. Marcus could smell gasoline, burning oil. They had minutes, maybe less, before the fuel ignited. Jake assessed the structural integrity, while Marcus dropped to his knees beside the driver's window. He shone his flashlight inside. A woman hung upside down, held by her seatbelt. Blood ran down her forehead into her hair. Her eyes were open, blinking against the rain that poured through the broken windshield. "Hey," Marcus called to her. "Can you hear me?" A weak nod. "My name's Marcus. I'm a paramedic. We're going to get you out, okay?" Another nod. Jake was already on the radio, calling for the jaws of life. They couldn't move her without stabilizing her neck, couldn't risk pulling her through the window. But Marcus could reach her hand. He did. Her fingers closed around his, surprisingly strong. "What's your name?" he asked, partly to assess her consciousness, partly because she needed to be a person, not a victim. "Lucia." Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "Is it bad?" Marcus had learned long ago not to lie in these moments. "Yeah, it's bad. But we're here now, and we're not leaving. Am I going to die?" The question hung in the air. In his 8 years as a paramedic, Marcus had heard it dozens of times. He'd learned that people always knew. Deep down, they always knew. "I'm not going to let that happen if I can help it," he said. "But I need you to fight with me. Tell me about yourself. You got family? People waiting for you?" Lucia's grip tightened. "Sister. Elena. She's in nursing school. I was supposed to call her tonight. You'll call her tomorrow. She worries about me. Sounds like a good sister. The best." Behind him, Marcus heard the fire crew arriving, heard Jake shouting coordinates. But his focus stayed on Lucia, on her hand in his, on keeping her present. "Tell me about her," he said. Lucia's breathing was getting shallower. "She's stronger than me. Always has been. Smart. Kind. She's going to be an amazing nurse. You're proud of her. So proud." The jaws of life roared to life. The smell of gasoline grew stronger. Marcus glanced up and saw Jake's face grim, urgent. They were running out of time. "Lucia, stay with me." Her eyes found his. In the flashlight beam, through the rain and blood, she looked directly at him. "If I don't," she whispered. "If I don't make it, tell her I wasn't scared. Tell her someone was here. You're gonna tell her yourself." But even as he said it, he felt her hand go slack. "Lucia. Lucia." The paramedics got her out 3 minutes later. Marcus performed CPR in the rain, in the mud. For 12 minutes straight, the ambulance rushed her to the hospital, where doctors worked for another 30 minutes. It wasn't enough. Lucia Morales was pronounced dead at 12:47 a.m., and Marcus Reed, soaked to the bone and covered in someone else's blood, sat in the hospital parking lot and wept. Marcus didn't move from the floor for 20 minutes. Noah found him there when he came out of his bedroom. The photo still clutched in Marcus's hand, the letter spread out beside him. Marcus looked up. His son stood in Superman pajamas, hair sticking up, concern written all over his 8-year-old face. "I'm okay, buddy. You don't look okay." Noah sat down next to him, pressed against his side the way he'd done since he was tiny. Marcus wrapped an arm around him automatically, grateful for the weight, the warmth, the reminder that this right here was what mattered. "Who's that?" Noah pointed to the photograph. Marcus hesitated. He'd never told Noah about the bad calls, never brought the weight of his work home. But Noah was getting older, asking harder questions. Maybe it was time. Her name was Lucia. "I tried to help her once, but I couldn't save her." Noah studied the photo carefully. "She looks like the lady across the hall. She's her sister." "Oh." Noah processed this with the careful seriousness that made him seem older than his years. "Is that why you don't talk to her? The lady across the hall?" Marcus's throat tightened. "Yeah, because you're sad you couldn't save her sister? Something like that. But it's not her fault you're sad." Out of the mouths of babes. Marcus pulled Noah closer. "No, it's not her fault. Then why do you avoid her?" "She seems nice. Last week she helped me pick up my books when I dropped them." Marcus hadn't known that. Hadn't known that while he was carefully constructing walls, his son was making friends across the hall. The guilt sat heavy in his chest. "It's complicated, Noah. You always say that when you don't want to explain, because it's always true." Noah leaned his head against Marcus's shoulder. "Mrs. Patterson says running away from hard things makes them chase you." She said it about math homework, but maybe it works for other stuff too. Mrs. Patterson was Noah's second-grade teacher, and apparently she was a lot wiser than Marcus had given her credit for. Maybe, Marcus admitted. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, a siren wailed past. Marcus tensed reflexively, then forced himself to breathe. He wasn't on shift. Someone else was handling it. His job right now was to be here, with his son, trying to figure out how to be a better man than he'd been 3 months ago. Yeah? You know how you tell me I should apologize when I hurt someone, even if I didn't mean to? Marcus saw where this was going. I do. Maybe you should apologize to the lady across the hall for avoiding her, even if it wasn't her fault. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always listen. Marcus laughed, the sound surprising him. It felt good. Real. You're right. I should apologize. Tonight? Not tonight. But soon. Noah nodded, satisfied. He yawned, then stood up and headed back to his room. At the doorway, he paused. Dad? I think the lady across the hall is sad too. Maybe you could be sad together instead of sad separate. That might be better. Before Marcus could respond, Noah disappeared into his room, leaving Marcus alone with a child's wisdom and an adult's complications. He picked up Elena's letter again. Read it 3 times. I don't blame you for what happened. I just need to know she wasn't alone. She wasn't alone. That was the one thing Marcus could give her. The one truth that might matter. Lucia died holding someone's hand. She died with someone who cared, who fought, who bore witness. Maybe Elena needed to know that. Maybe Marcus needed to say it out loud. He folded the letter carefully and stood up. Not tonight. Noah was right about that too. But soon, he owed Elena the truth. He owed Lucia's memory that much. And maybe, just maybe, he owed himself permission to stop running. 3 days passed before Marcus could bring himself to knock on Elena's door. Those 3 days were their own kind of purgatory. He went to work, came home, helped Noah with homework, made dinner, went through all the motions of normal life while carrying the weight of words unsaid. Every time he passed Elena's door, he felt the pull of gravity, the knowledge that truth lived on the other side of that threshold, and he was a coward for not facing it. On Friday evening, after Noah was asleep, Marcus finally crossed the hallway. He stood outside Elena's door for 5 full minutes before raising his hand to knock. His knuckles hovered an inch from the wood. Once he did this, there was no going back. Once he spoke Lucia's name out loud. Once he shared those final moments, they would become real again in a way he'd spent 2 years trying to prevent. He knocked anyway. Soft footsteps approached. The peephole darkened. A pause. Then the door opened. Elena stood in jeans and an oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes, Lucia's eyes, the same warm brown, the same slight upturn at the corners widened in surprise. Marcus, I got your letter. I know. I wasn't sure if you'd... Can I come in? Elena stepped back immediately, gesturing him inside. Her apartment was a mirror image of his own same layout, different life. Where his walls were bare except for Noah's drawings, hers held photographs, lots of them. Most featured the same 2 young women at different ages, Elena and Lucia at the beach, at a birthday party, hiking in the mountains, living their lives. Marcus felt like an intruder in a shrine. Do you want coffee? Water? Elena asked, nervous energy in her voice. I'm okay. They stood in her living room, an awkward distance apart, neither quite sure how to begin. Elena broke first. I'm sorry for ambushing you with the letter. I should have asked first, should have given you warning. No. Marcus shook his head. You did the right thing. I needed to know why you were here. I wasn't ready. And now? Now I think I owe you the truth. I think Lucia would want you to know. At the sound of her sister's name, Elena's composure cracked slightly. She gestured toward the couch. Please. Sit. They sat at opposite ends, a careful distance maintained. Marcus noticed Elena's hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, white-knuckled, bracing for impact. "I need you to understand something first," Marcus said quietly. "I remember your sister. I've remembered her every day for 2 years. Some calls you can let go. Some calls you file away and move on from. Lucia wasn't one of those, because she fought, because she was kind even while dying, because the last thing she asked me to do was tell you she wasn't scared." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. "She talked about you," Marcus continued, the words coming easier now that he'd started. "In those last minutes, when I was trying to keep her conscious, she told me about her sister in nursing school, about how proud she was of you, about how you were going to be an amazing nurse. She said that, those exact words." A sob broke through Elena's defenses. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Marcus sat still, letting her grieve, letting her process. He'd learned long ago that some moments required silence more than comfort. When Elena looked up again, her face was wet, but her voice was steady. "Tell me everything. Please. I need to know it all." Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay. But I'm warning you, some of it's going to be hard to hear." "I know. Tell me anyway." So he did. Marcus started with the rain. That's what he remembered. First, the sound of it hammering the roof of the ambulance as they raced down Highway 26. Visibility was almost zero. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up. Jake was driving, focused and silent, while Marcus mentally prepared for what they'd find. "Single vehicle accidents in weather like that," Marcus said, his voice distant. "They're usually bad. The momentum, the lack of control. By the time someone realizes they're in trouble, it's often too late." Elena listened without interrupting, her hands still clasped in her lap. "We got there before the fire crew. That almost never happens, but we were close. I could see the car from the road upside down in the drainage ditch, about 30 feet from the highway. Jake parked and we grabbed our gear and went down the embankment. The ground was like soup. Everything was mud and rain and darkness." Marcus paused, seeing it again. The beam of his flashlight catching on twisted metal. The smell of gasoline mixing with wet earth. The terrible silence before Jake called out, "I've got a pulse." The driver's side was crushed pretty badly. The door wouldn't open, but I could reach through the window. I could see her, your sister, hanging upside down from her seatbelt. There was blood on her face from a head wound. Her eyes were open. Elena made a small sound, but didn't speak. I told her my name, asked her if she could hear me. She nodded, so I reached in and took her hand. His own hand made the gesture unconsciously, fingers curling around invisible fingers. I asked her name. She told me, Lucia. Then she asked me if it was bad, if she was going to die. I've heard that question before, and there's no good answer. You can't lie to someone in that moment. They know, but you can't steal their hope either. So I told her we were there, we weren't leaving, and she needed to fight. The living room was quiet except for the sound of Elena's breathing, shallow, controlled, like she was afraid that breathing too loud might make him stop. I kept her talking. That's part of the protocol, keep them conscious, keep them oriented. But it was more than that. I needed her to know she wasn't alone. I asked about her family. That's when she told me about you. What did she say? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. She said you were in nursing school. That you worried about her. That she was supposed to call you that night. She said you were the best sister she could ask for. Tears streamed down Elena's face silently. She was proud of you, Elena. Even in the worst moment of her life, she was thinking about you, about how strong you were, about the kind of nurse you'd become. She made me promise. Marcus's voice caught. He cleared his throat, forced himself to continue. She made me promise that if she didn't make it, I'd tell you she wasn't scared. Was she? Scared? Marcus thought about how to answer that honestly. I think she was. But she was also brave. She didn't panic. She didn't scream. She held my hand and talked about you and tried to stay present. That takes courage most people don't have. How long were you with her? From when we arrived until we got her out? Maybe 15 minutes. The fire crew had to use hydraulic cutters to open up the car. We couldn't move her before that the risk of spinal injury was too high, so I stayed with her. Held her hand, kept talking. What happened when they got her out? This was the hard part. Marcus took a breath. Her vitals started crashing. I could feel it, her grip getting weaker, her responses getting slower. When we finally got her free and I could assess her fully, I knew it was bad. Internal bleeding, probably. Trauma to multiple organs. We did CPR right there in the rain, then got her into the ambulance. I rode with her to the hospital, kept doing compressions the whole way. Did she say anything else? No. She lost consciousness before we got her out of the car. The last thing she said was about you, that you were stronger than her, that you were going to be amazing. Then her eyes closed. Elena was crying openly now, hands pressed to her chest like she could hold the pain inside if she pressed hard enough. At the hospital, they worked on her for 30 minutes. I waited outside the trauma bay. I always wait. I need to know, need to see it through. When the doctor came out and shook his head, Marcus stopped. Some things were too raw to share. I went out to the parking lot. And I sat in my car and I cried. Because I couldn't save her. Because I'd held her hand and made silent promises I couldn't keep. You stayed with her, Elena said fiercely, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. You held her hand. You made sure she knew someone cared. That's not failing, Marcus. That's everything. I should have done more. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. It was enough. Elena leaned forward, intense despite her tears. You gave her comfort in the worst moment of her life. You listened to her. You let her talk about the person she loved most. You made her last minutes bearable. Do you understand how much that means? How much I needed to know that? Marcus felt something break inside him, a wall he'd built 2 years ago. A defense that had outlived its purpose. I see her face every time I look at you, he admitted. Same eyes, same voice, same way of tilting your head when you're thinking. That's why I couldn't face you. That's why looking at you hurts. Because every time I see you, I remember that I couldn't save her. Elena stood up, crossed the space between them, knelt in front of where he sat on the couch. She took both of his hands in hers, deliberately, firmly. You didn't fail her, Marcus. You honored her, and now you've honored her again by telling me the truth. Thank you. She held his gaze, and for the first time since that rainy night, Marcus didn't look away. Things changed after that night, but not in the ways Marcus expected. There was no sudden friendship. No immediate closeness. What formed between them was quieter. More tentative, like two people learning to exist in the same space without flinching. The next morning, Marcus saw Elena in the hallway. Instead of running, he nodded. Said, "Good morning." She nodded back. "Good morning." That was all. But it was enough. Noah noticed immediately. "You said good morning to her," he whispered excitedly as they headed down the stairs. "I did. Does that mean you're not avoiding her anymore?" "I'm trying not to." "Good. Because she helped me with my math homework yesterday and she's really nice." Marcus stopped walking. "She what?" "I saw her on the stairs and she asked if I needed help with anything and I said I was stuck on fractions and she explained it way better than you do." "No offense. None taken." Marcus shook his head, smiling despite himself. His son had been building bridges while he'd been burning them. "Noah, I need you to tell me these things. I just did. Before they happen, I mean. But then you'd have said no." Fair point. Over the next few weeks, a rhythm developed. Marcus and Elena passed each other in the hallway with polite greetings. Sometimes they rode the elevator together, making small talk about weather or building maintenance. Nothing deep, nothing personal, but the tension was gone. Marcus stopped timing his exits to avoid her. Elena stopped wondering if she'd done something wrong. They existed as neighbors who'd shared a difficult truth and were still figuring out what came next. One evening, Marcus came home to find Noah and Elena in the hallway, working on a science project. They'd spread poster board and markers across the floor, fully absorbed in creating a model of the solar system. "Dad, look, Miss Elena is helping me with my project. She knows all about the planets." Elena looked up, slightly sheepish. "I hope this is okay. Noah said it was due tomorrow and he needed help." "It's fine," Marcus said. "And meant it?" She smiled, a real smile, not the careful ones they'd exchanged in passing. "He's a great kid." "Yeah." "He is." That night, after Noah was in bed, Marcus thought about how healing didn't happen all at once. It happened in small increments, in conversations held, in truths shared, in the slow rebuilding of a life you thought was permanently broken. He thought about Lucia, about the promise he'd made. Tell her I wasn't scared. Tell her someone was here. He'd kept that promise. And maybe that was enough. Maybe carrying someone's last words across time and distance and grief was its own kind of saving. Maybe he'd been holding on to guilt he never needed to carry. The thought didn't erase the pain, but it made it bearable. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus went to bed without replaying that night in the rain. He slept through until morning. 3 weeks later, Marcus told Noah they were moving. "What?" Noah looked up from his homework, face-stricken. "I got offered a position at a different station. Better hours, better pay. It's a good opportunity. But I like it here. I like my school. I like Miss Elena. You'll make new friends." "I don't want new friends." Marcus understood the feeling. He'd been settling into a rhythm here, finally comfortable in his own building, finally sleeping through the night. But comfort scared him more than grief. Comfort meant letting his guard down. Comfort meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant risk. The position he'd been offered was real, a shift supervisor role at a suburban station 40 minutes away. More money, better benefits, a fresh start where no one knew his history. He'd applied for it months ago, before Elena moved in, when he was actively looking for exits. Now he had one, and he couldn't decide if taking it was wisdom or cowardice. He was loading boxes into his car when Elena found him. "Noah told me you're leaving." Marcus didn't look at her, just kept stacking boxes. "New job opportunity." "That's great. Congratulations." "Thanks, Marcus." The way she said his name made him stop, made him turn around. Elena stood in the parking lot, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Are you running again?" "I'm taking a better job." "That's not what I asked." Marcus set down the box he was holding. "I think this is best for Noah. Better schools in that area, safer neighborhood. Noah is happy here. He'll adjust. Will you?" The question hung between them. Cars passed on the street beyond the parking lot. Someone was grilling on a balcony, the smell of charcoal and meat drifting through the air. Normal evening sounds. Normal life continuing while Marcus tried to decide who he wanted to be. "Why do you care?" he asked, not unkindly. Elena took a step closer. "Because I've spent 2 years trying to find you. Because you gave me the one thing I needed most, the truth about my sister's last moments. Because we've finally gotten to a place where we can exist in the same space without it destroying both of us. And now you want to run away the second things get comfortable. I'm not running, aren't you? I'm trying to do what's right for my son." "No." Elena's voice was firm. "You're doing what's easiest for you. And I understand why I do. But easy isn't always right." Marcus felt anger rising, defensive and sharp. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" "You're not running from this building, Marcus. You're not running from me. You're running from yourself, from the possibility that maybe you don't have to carry all this guilt alone, that maybe there's a life after Lucia where you're allowed to be happy." The words hit like a physical blow. "I can't," Marcus said, voice rough. "I can't look at you without seeing her. I know. But has it occurred to you that maybe I can't look at you without seeing the man who stayed with my sister when she was dying? Without seeing the person who gave me closure? You think this is one-sided, but it's not. You matter in this story, too. Elena reached out, touched his hand briefly, just a brush of fingers, there and gone. You don't have to stay, she said softly. But don't leave thinking you're doing it for the right reasons, because we both know you're not. She walked away, leaving Marcus in the parking lot with half-packed boxes and a truth he didn't want to face. That night, Noah refused to pack his things. He sat on his bed, arms crossed, face set in a stubborn expression Marcus recognized from his own reflection. I'm not going. Noah, we've talked about this. No, you talked. I just listened. That's not the same thing. Marcus sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. This is a good opportunity. You'll understand when you're older. You always say that. I understand now. You're scared. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. You're scared of Miss Elena. That's not. Marcus stopped, looked at his son. Why would you think that? Because you were happy. We both were. Then you got all weird and decided we have to move. You do this every time things get good. We moved from the last apartment because you said it had bad memories. Before that, you said the neighborhood was too loud. Now you're making up another reason. But the real reason is you're scared. 8 years old. And already too perceptive for his own good. It's more complicated than that, buddy, is it? Or is that just what adults say when they don't want to admit they're wrong? Marcus almost laughed. Where'd you learn to argue like this? From you. You're always telling me to think for myself, to question things, to not just accept what people tell me. So I'm questioning this. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside Noah's window, the sky was turning purple with dusk. Streetlights were flickering on one by one. Dad? Noah's voice was quieter now, more serious. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you remember Miss Elena's sister, the lady you tried to help? Marcus's chest tightened. Yeah. I remember her. Do you think she'd want us to move away? I don't know. Why? Because Miss Elena seems really sad sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes I see her in the hallway and she looks the way you looked after Mom left. Like she's lonely. And I thought maybe we could help her not be lonely. But we can't do that if we move away, out of the mouths of babes. Marcus pulled Noah into a hug, holding him tight. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You're just not always listening. This time Marcus did laugh. You said that before, because it's still true. They stayed like that for a while, father and son, figuring things out together. Finally, Marcus pulled back. What if I'm not good at this? At being someone's friend? At letting people close? Nobody's good at things the first time they try. That's what practice is for. And besides, Noah added with the confidence only children possess, being scared is okay, as long as you still try. Marcus looked at his son, this brave, kind, impossibly wise little person, and made a decision. Okay. Really? Really. But I need you to help me. Help you with what? With being brave enough to try. Noah grinned. Deal. 1 year later, the three of them stood in front of a modest headstone in Riverside Cemetery. Autumn leaves crunching under their feet. Lucia Maria Morales, beloved sister, treasured friend, 1994, 2023. Elena knelt down, placing fresh flowers, sunflowers, Lucia's favorite, against the stone. Noah stood beside her, holding a drawing he'd made. It showed 3 stick figures, one with angel wings above, 2 below holding hands. Is it okay if I put this here? He asked Elena softly. She'd love it, Elena assured him, helping him secure the drawing with a rock. Marcus stood slightly back, hands in his pockets, watching. The pain of being here was real, would probably always be real. But it was different now. It wasn't the sharp, cutting pain of guilt and failure. It was the softer ache of remembrance, of honoring a life that mattered. "I brought something too," Marcus said, pulling a small envelope from his jacket. Inside was the incident report from that night, the official document he'd finally requested 6 months ago. He'd read it once, then folded it up and saved it for today. Elena looked at him questioningly. "It's the report," he explained. "From the accident," I thought. Elena took the envelope, held it for a moment, then shook her head. "No. You keep it. Or we can leave it here. But I don't need it." "You sure?" "I'm sure. You already told me everything that mattered. The official version doesn't change anything." Marcus nodded, understanding. He knelt down and tucked the envelope under the flowers, a final offering, a release. "Thank you for staying with her," Elena said quietly. "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for making sure she wasn't alone." "She made it easy," Marcus replied. "Even in the worst moment, she was thinking of you. That says something about the kind of person she was. She was the best person I knew." "I believe that." Noah, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "Miss Elena? Do you think your sister would be happy that we're friends?" Elena smiled through tears. "I think she'd be thrilled. She always wanted me to have good people in my life. You and your dad definitely qualify." "Good, because you're like family now. That's what Dad says." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He'd said that just a few days ago, when Noah asked if Elena was his girlfriend. "She's family," Marcus had explained. "Different kind of love, same kind of important." They stood together for a while longer, the three of them. No one rushed. No one felt uncomfortable with the silence. This was part of their routine now, first Sunday of every month. They came here together. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just stood in quiet remembrance. Either way was okay. As they walked back to the car, Noah ran ahead to look at a memorial statue. Elena and Marcus walked side by side. Their pace naturally matched after a year of practice. "I meant what Noah said," Marcus told her. "About family. I know. I feel it too. It's strange, isn't it? How something terrible can create something good. Not strange, just life. We don't get to choose our tragedies, but we do get to choose what we build afterward." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Not for the traces of Lucia he'd spent a year learning to see past, but for Elena herself. The woman who'd tracked him down not for revenge, but for connection. Who'd extended grace when he deserved judgment. Who'd taught him that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about integration. "Looking at you still hurts," he admitted. "But now it's the kind of hurt that means I'm healing." Elena nodded, understanding. "Good hurt instead of bad hurt." "Yeah, exactly." They reached the car. Noah was already buckled in, humming to himself. Marcus opened the passenger door for Elena, a habit they'd fallen into, and she smiled her thanks. As they drove away from the cemetery, Marcus caught a glimpse of them in the rearview mirror. Elena turned around in her seat, laughing at something Noah was saying. Noah animated and happy, telling some story about school. Two people who'd come into his life through tragedy and stayed through choice. He'd spent 2 years running from ghosts. Now he was learning to live with memories. There was a difference he was discovering. Ghosts haunted you. Memories kept you company. And in the passenger seat, Elena caught his eye and smiled, not Lucia's smile, but her own. Completely, wonderfully her own. Marcus smiled back. Then he turned his attention back to the road ahead. The afternoon sun warm through the windshield and drove them all home.